Washington's most influential players sit down with Roll Call, dissecting the news to go beyond headlines and look ahead to what matters most in Washington and beyond.
Let's get right to it. I wanted to start with just news of the day. The Speaker just said that he's going to be voting for Donald Trump for president. What do you think that says about the ability to unify the party and Republicans behind the nominee?
Yeah, I think we're in the process of unifying behind the nominee. You can see that in the poll data that indicates Republicans are coming together, no matter who they may have supported earlier in the process. We know it's the choice is clear, and I'm glad we're all coming together.
Very well. I want to start actually not with politics, but with baseball, if I may. And your love of the game, and at one point in time you said that you were playing yourself up to a certain age and then realized you had to pivot away. What's your favorite memory of a baseball game, perhaps that you went to in person, a major league game or a minor league game?
Well, when I was 13, we lived in Augusta, Georgia, and there was a farm team of the Detroit Tigers there, the Augusta Tigers. And my dad took myself and my friends to between 35 and 40 games. We were out there all the time, eating hot dogs, watching baseball. It was terrific. Baseball both is exhilarating and humbling. One of my first really humbling experiences was pitching in an all-star game when I walked the bases loaded, walked a guy across the plate, and gave up a bases loaded home run. Which probably eliminated any thoughts I might have had that I had a future in baseball.
I would dare say that Senator Bunning had a slightly better career in baseball
outcome,
than you did.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I know that you say that you and Senator Reid will talk about separate from politics, your shared interest in baseball and particularly in the Nationals.
And Bryce Harper, who's from Nevada.
How has your relationship with Reid changed recently, and have you had an opportunity to talk to him about what you've written in your book and making the comparison to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and have you talked yet about that or heard what he's said about you?
Well, you know, there's no point in talking about it. Everything I mentioned has been quite public on Harry's part over the years. I remember in particular the inappropriateness, I thought, of his declaring the Iraq War lost publicly when we had troops fighting in that country. Personally, Harry's a nice guy. Sometimes when the lights are on, he turns into kind of a bombastic person who makes ill-advised comments for which he later ends up apologizing. So I didn't say anything in the book that he hadn't already said, and there was no particular reason for us to talk about it. You know, when he attacks me, for example, he's been doing routinely for suggesting I agree with Donald Trump on a lot of things that I obviously don't agree with Donald Trump on. I view that as just business. It's not something we have to discuss on the floor.
Do you believe that you might have a better opportunity to work with his apparent successor, Senator Schumer? Do you think that relationship will be any different than the relationship that you've had with Senator Reid?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out, because I think Chuck's going to be the next Democratic leader.
Looking at another Democratic leader, more significant one in stature, some would likely say, is the President of the United States, and you write quite a bit in the book about your conversations with him, noting that at one point in time you had a baseball game on that you were watching while you were on the phone with him, and it sounds from what you wrote in the book like he was doing most of the talking during that conversation. How has that relationship, or lack thereof, affected the ability to get things done?
Well, there's no lack of a relationship. I did point out something others have pointed out, which is the President is quite interested in explaining not only his point of view, but yours to you, which is sometimes a grating characteristic. But the reason we haven't been able to fix Social Security, for example, and Medicare, or do comprehensive tax reform is not because the President's not a smart guy. It's just he's not a moderate. I mean, he's not interested in doing business most of the time with the Republican Congress.
Do you think that either Secretary Clinton or Mr. Trump would be more prone to being deal makers than the outgoing president?
We'll find out.
I noticed that just a week ago you had, or the Republican National Committee announced that Senator Barrasso would be chairing the committee that's handling the platform in Cleveland. And I understand from talking to him that that's something that's done sort of with the advice of the leader and the Speaker of the House and the
Well,
party.
actually, the platform is done on the Senate side, and it was my recommendation that John do it, and I'm pleased that he was willing to do it.
Do you have any concerns about how you're going to, and how the party is going to reconcile things like trade, where I don't think you and Mr. Trump are necessarily on the same page?
Good question. I told Donald Trump I thought we ought not to have a fight over the platform, that he wasn't going to change what we think Republicans are. He wouldn't be the first candidate for president that didn't follow every particular part of the platform. I recommended to him that we not get in a fight over the platform, and I hope we won't. So I think you're likely to see a platform that's very similar to platforms that we have adopted in the past.
Let me ask you two closing questions here. The first one, something in the book that you and I have discussed on occasion previously, one of which is your involvement in Burma. And you spend some time in the book talking about that. Where do you think things stand right now with the change in power, and how do you foresee that going? And are you going to visit anytime soon?
They've made a lot of progress. They still have this outrageous provision in the Constitution that prohibits Aung San Suu Kyi from actually being elected president, but as a practical matter, she's running the country. My advice to her is not surprising. The biggest challenge in a new democracy is delivering some kind of tangible, measurable change for people. Because frequently there is discouragement after a new election. Your expectations are high, you have a new election, and all of a sudden you realize your life hadn't changed that much. So I know it's going to be a challenge for the new government to deliver some measurable success for the Burmese people. But if anybody can do it, she can.
I'll close with actually going back to the beginning of the book and also going back to the beginning of your life. I remember that a lot of people, I felt like a lot of people didn't know when there was a debate that came up a few months ago now about vaccines and the wisdom of vaccines. I felt like there were people who were surprised to hear your position on that particular issue. I did not know that you had essentially been confined to a bed for a time.
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, I got polio when I was 2 years old. It affected the muscle in my left leg between the knee and the hip, the quadricep. And once the flu-like experience went away, what happened to polio patients was pretty unpredictable. You could die, you could end up in an iron lung, or some form of paralysis in between. In my case, it affected my left leg. We were fortunate to be within 60 miles of Warm Springs, Georgia, which Franklin Roosevelt had set up as a polio treatment center. My dad was overseas fighting the Germans. My mother took me over there, and they taught her a physical therapy regimen. And for 2 years, like a drill sergeant, she watched me every minute and administered that procedure. And it was an early lesson in dealing with adversity, knuckling down and working hard and overcoming the inevitable speed bumps that we all run into in life. So I think it was a defining moment for me, and I've applied it to the long game.
And if I can close by just asking, has it affected the way that you've looked at, say, an issue like we have this Zika virus issue that we have right now, and medical research issues? How has that affected you there?
Well, I'm certainly, but everybody is. I don't think I'm unique in that sense. I'm particularly excited about what Senator Alexander may be doing with the 21st Century Cures bill. It's going to include the cancer moonshot the Vice President's interested in, precision medicine the President's interested in. I'm interested in some FDA reforms that will allow regenerative medicine to be experimented with more rapidly. I'm really interested in that, but I don't think that's unique. I mean, I think everybody is interested in these magnificent innovations that are occurring all over the place in healthcare, and we see everybody living longer and longer as a result.